you know.
All right. Well,
So
let's do that quick set.
okay, here we go. Hello, hello. Thank you everyone for joining us for Working Together Seamlessly as a Sales and Pre-Sales Team with Art Fromm. My name is Robin Mercado, and I am the Inside Sales Development Representative at Consensus, and I'm going to be your moderator for today's session. DEMOFEST is presented by Consensus. Consensus is intelligent demo automation software that helps scale pre-sales with interactive video demos. You can learn more at goconsensus.com or view the automated micro demo at the link in the Docs tab on the right of your screen. You can also find a document to follow along with Art's presentation in the Docs tab as well. Consensus is very proud to provide this event for free to all attendees. However, we would really like to invite each of you to donate to our company's humanitarian organizations as well. You can learn more about this and donate by visiting the DEMOFEST Gives Back booth in our virtual expo hall in the Booths tab or at the link in the Docs tab on the right of your screen. We also invite you to join us in our DEMOFEST community on Discord. Our community is where you can connect with speakers, get exclusive access to content and events, and where the conversation will continue long after the DEMOFEST event has ended. You can join the community at the link in the Docs tab. We, of course, encourage you to participate in today's session. On the right of your console, you can see a few ways to engage with us throughout the session. The chat function will allow you to engage with us as well as other attendees. And throughout the session, you're going to see a few polls that Art will open up. We encourage you to participate in those polls as your feedback is very important to us, and it's really going to help Art to tailor his presentation to you. Our speaker Art will be taking questions from the audience at the end of the session, but we encourage you to ask questions at any time through the Q&A box. You can also upvote a question if it's already been asked, which will help us to prioritize answering those questions at the end. If at any time you're having any technical difficulties, you can click the gear icon on the bottom of your screen. And here you'll see a help document to help troubleshoot any common issues. And now I would like to introduce our speaker, Art. Art is a sales transformation consultant with a wealth of consultative sales training and development expertise. Based on 20 plus years as a customer and in pre-sales, sales, and sales management roles. Art began in engineering and quickly moved into the software space, running internal software applications at Fortune 500 companies. This led to sales engineering, account manager, and sales management positions with leading enterprise software companies where he routinely surpassed revenue and performance targets. Art moved into an internal sales enablement role in 2000, then drove US business for a global learning provider, and eventually founded his own company in 2009, Team Sales Development, focused on helping SEs and AMs improve results, seamless sales. And with that, I will turn the rest of the time over to you, Art.
Thank you very much, Robin. I appreciate that. And thank you for everybody that's here live. And if you're listening to the recording, welcome as well. I want to thank Garen and everybody else that have been working so hard on this entire event. It's a fantastic opportunity, and I'm very privileged and honored to be part of it. Just as we get started here, we will be using the chat quite a bit today. So if you don't mind real quick, perhaps just throw in there where you're calling in from so that we can see who you are and all that as we get started here. And I also want to say that Robin mentioned in the Docs tab on the right-hand side of your screen, there is a document there that does have information for you. That's the handout for our session. It's the last one on the list. Feel free to download that, take a look at it. You can follow along, or you can use it as a reference later because it's going to be the summary of everything we did. And by the way, speaking of summaries, the important thing about the things that Robin mentioned, I've been a customer, so I've been on the receiving end of demos and presentations, and I was the one that, companies were trying to take my money away from my budget that I had. The middle part of my career was sales and sales management roles. And then for the last 23 years, and I can't even believe I'm saying that, I've been in sales enablement roles with my own company here, Team Sales Development. So it's a privilege to work with all of you. Also, I just want to let you know that we all know that sales is a team sport. So that's a given. It's something that we all have experienced. And there's a lot of things out there that are about maybe tips and tricks and things like that. Well, that's not what this session is going to be about. We're going to take a pretty deep dive on the relationship that we have with each other, whether you're sales or pre-sales, and also our relationship with our customer or buyer or the stakeholders that we're going through. Now, since we are going to be aiming some of this specifically to sales and some of it specifically to pre-sales, I would like to quickly open up a poll here, and it's going to be on the side of your screen. So what I'm looking for is if you would just indicate what your role is. So there's sort of a grouping here. Either you're a sales role, a pre-sales role, or sales management, or pre-sales management, or you might be in a role of enablement. Now, I have 3 categories there for enablement. The one that says enablement/HR is where you're covering both sales and pre-sales together. If you are only supporting pre-sales, you can choose that option. If you only support sales, you can choose that option for enablement. And then I have on here post-sales because we may have somebody that is in that role, or there's even an other as a catch-all. So if you are a other, if you would please put in the chat, what is your other role? And we'll give everybody a few minutes here. I know we've got a lot of people on here, and so I'm waiting for many results and votes to come in because I do want to see if we got representation from all the groups. So far, I see quite a few from sales management. I know that there's many more. All right. And it looks like I just need to stop sharing for a moment in order to share the results. So I'm only seeing about 10 or 12 votes here. If everybody could please help out with that, I'll show the results so far. And you may, it looks like I need to scroll, or you may need to scroll. So we've got a few in sales, welcome, some in pre-sales. Surprisingly, nobody in sales management or doesn't want to admit it. But we do have pre-sales management, which is awesome. We've got 1 person or 2 that look like we've got pre-sales enablement. That's fantastic. Some post-sales, and then some other. And let me take a quick look at the chat and see who said that they're other. Okay, got it. So it looks like somebody decided to look at the other one. Perfect. All right, so let me stop sharing that at the moment. And let me close that out. All right. So with that in mind, just going to take a moment here for it to switch over. Let's talk a little bit about what is the bottom line up front here. What are you here for? And what is your investment of this time for? Well, ideally, as we go through this as an SE, some of the outcomes that you might want. And by the way, if anybody is familiar with Great Demo, at which I'm a certified partner, you probably are familiar with the critical business issue, or if you are a John Kerr Mastering Technical Sales devotee, I'm also a primary facilitator for John, and he calls it the key business issues, right? So here's what those are, and this is the what's in it for you. So as an SE, what you really want is for your time to be used effectively and efficiently. You want to move the deal forward, and that's really the job of the SE, is to move the deal forward and increase the probability of the win. So as an SE or pre-sales, we aren't responsible for getting the sign off, but we are responsible for moving it forward. For those as a sales role or account manager, generally speaking, I'll refer to it interchangeably that way, even though I know there's a lot of different job titles, as you saw there. You want to obviously win more deals and have happier customers and more repeat customers and renewal customers, especially now in the SaaS world where it's the consumption that is what you are measured on and what we're looking for those customers. And then as a sales team working together, you want to work more seamlessly together. I think that's always a goal, and it's certainly something that we hear a lot. The thing is, how do we do that, right? And so it's about persuading or influencing. You saw a few sessions on that. Yesterday, that was discussed at length. And also you heard Garen talking about this morning in the keynote about helping the customer to buy. helping the prospect to buy. And so really that's as a sales team what we're doing. For those of you in the sales management and enablement roles, this entire slide is really what your focus is to help individually the SEs, the sales, and then of course as a team to work all of this together. So these are the things that you will be able to get out of this session. So our agenda real quick is that we're going to talk about 3 main challenges. We have very limited time, so I've boiled this down to some of the essences. 3 main challenges: what working as a seamless team looks like, 3 solutions, and then we'll do the wrap up in the Q&A. And as Robin mentioned, you can certainly put questions in the Q&A, and you could put ideas in the chat. I'll try to glance at them a little bit as we go through here, and she's going to keep an eye on it as well. More information, by the way, will follow about all this, because what we're covering today is a very, very high level overview of the topics that I'm going to have in a book that I'm writing, which is all about seamless sales. And you can look for that hopefully by the end of this year or so. I should be having that come out, and you can get all the rest of the details there. Now, what I do with all of my workshops, any of you that have been through it already, is I'd like you to write down key takeaways for today's session. This will help you remember what you take away. It will also help you because at the end, you're going to share this, so you will be able to see what each other have said. And it helps me gauge the uptake of the session and what it's done for you. So please write those down. I'll try to remind you about some as we go through too. All right, so let's take a look at challenge number 1 of the 3 challenges. And to do that, I'd like to open up another quick poll here. Now, let me just show you the slide first, and then I'll open the poll, because I want to explain what you're going to answer is from the buyer's perspective. So your clients, your prospects, what is their perceived value of the sales versus the pre-sales role out of 100 percentage points? So it's basically a ratio here. If you were to answer 80-20, it means that the prospect would see 80% of the value of the salesperson or sales role and 20% of pre-sales. And the other end of the spectrum is the opposite, 20% value out of the sales role or the salesperson and 80% out of sales. So let me stop sharing here for a moment, and let me open up that poll. All right. So again, this is a ratio. What do you feel like from the buyer's perspective is their perception? And this has been talked about in a number of the other sessions as well. So we'll get to that in just a moment. But what is the ratio, or what is the amount of value of what's perceived for the salesperson versus the pre-sales person? All right. And again, I can see, a half a dozen votes, or maybe a dozen here so far. And we've got about 75 people watching live. So if you're able to jump over and take a look at the poll real quick, that would be great. All right. So we've got a bit of a split vote here, but a grouping nonetheless. So what we have is a big grouping here that is saying in favor of more of the pre-sales being valued or seen as having value. And there's less, but there's still a few that say, you know what, sometimes the salesperson is seen as having just as much, if not more value. But I do want to point everybody to this, because this part right here, the 20 to 30% value of a salesperson versus the 70 to 80% value of a pre-sales person is very typically what we see. And in fact, this is the first major issue or challenge that we have. So the first challenge or issue is that very often sales, or I should say pre-sales or SEs, are perceived by clients as having a lot more value than the salesperson. Now, I'm not saying that that's necessarily completely true. We'll talk about that in a minute, but notice that it says perceived, first of all. Secondly, even if you take a look in the keynote yesterday, Lori was mentioning that, it's as low as 3% of value that's seen of a salesperson. I personally experienced this because at one point in my career, I was what was called a technical program coordinator, where I was involved with the customer from the very beginning of the engagement all the way through, including implementation, success, and all that. And I had a relationship with a couple of companies for 2 years. in that role, and they trusted me implicitly because it included the sales engineer role. What I wasn't doing though was I wasn't doing the sales part of it. I wasn't doing the, the quotes and all that stuff. Well, my company, who I was working for at the time, which was a division of Lockheed Martin, said, you know what, since you're already doing everything, why don't you go ahead and take on the role of the salesperson? Let me stop sharing for a second here. Why don't you take on the role of the salesperson? And it's all upside potential, no downside. And I said, great, that sounds good. So I went in on Monday, and when I introduced myself to the client as now their salesperson also, guess what happened? They stopped believing like 1/3 of what I said. And I was, I said, I'm the same person that was here Friday. And they said, oh, no, you're not. You're doing sales now. And as sales, you have a quota. And so therefore, we believe that you're going to be very salesy and not as helpful as you was. Well, as you had been. So luckily, we did get that all worked out. And eventually they started to realize it was a good thing for both of us. But this just shows that, unfortunately, there's just not that amount of the perception of value all the time. Now, that's one thing, which says that means as a SE or pre-sales, we do have trust, and that's something we should not squander. We don't want to lose our trust. We have trust to lose, which we don't want to do. The salesperson, on the other hand, and I've been in both roles, and I'm in sales now for my own company, the salesperson has trust to gain. So one of the things that we'll talk about as we move through here is the way that we as pre-sales can help build trust for the salesperson, help them become the hero, work together as a team so that we are supporting them and we are helping the customer see that there's value for both of us in terms of what we're doing. Let me close that poll, by the way. The other thing that's happened sometimes, and you'll notice that I'm going to put on here the comment inherently, is that very often when it comes to our relationships, first of all, as we just saw, the clients don't necessarily trust sales automatically. And sadly, and again, I've been on both roles of this, sales doesn't inherently trust pre-sales. So we've got the relationship with the client or the buyer going on as a challenge. We've got an internal relationship as a challenge as well. And I think sometimes we'll get into this a little bit more later, but sometimes the salesperson might be, afraid of what the pre-sales person would say. Or maybe as pre-sales, we haven't done things that show that we should have that trust. And perhaps we've done harbor tours and we've done technology demos that really didn't address some of the core things that were needed. So this points to the need for us to get together better as a sales team. What we want to do, and again, we meaning if you're in sales or as pre-sales, is work together to show that we can help the buyer with what's best for them. So for pre-sales, this is probably, earning some trust with the salesperson, showing that you're capable. Many of the workshops, including Great Demo, Mastering Technical Sales, and other things that I offer, are about equipping pre-sales so that you can take on these responsibilities. And sales will love that because the whole point is us as sales need to win more business and us as pre-sales need to move the deal forward. So it's really something that can benefit both parties. Now, the second big challenge. So this is the first big challenge. Second big challenge, and this I'm going to do this in the form of a poll as well. And for this one, everybody listen carefully because there's going to be two different polls here real quick. One is going to be if you're in pre-sales, and then the second one in just a moment will be for sales. So this first one is just for pre-sales. So everybody that's in pre-sales and the pre-sales manager, you can answer this one. What is the percentage of time, and I need to stop sharing here real quick. What is the percentage of time you feel like you are properly equipped by sales for maximum success? And we're all family here. We're all working together. We all want to work together better as a team. So I'd ask you to be honest about this. Where do you feel that you are, how often are you adequately prepared to be successful for maximum success? And that's utilization and the preparation for it. All right, so let me show what we've got so far. And perhaps not surprisingly, I'm glad to see some of you feel like it's as much as 70 or 60%, some of you at the 40 to 50%. And there's a bell curve here that's weighted pretty heavily toward the bottom, which is somewhat expected, is that it's going to be things that are more like, only max maybe 40% or as low as 20% that you feel like is not where you're not actually equipped for full success. So keep that in mind for a moment, data point there. And let me close that one and open up the next one. So this is for anybody that's here in the sales roles. And again, these are anonymous, so we don't know who's answering. But if you would please put in there, if you're in the sales role, honestly, what percentage of the time do you feel that you are properly utilizing or equipping pre-sales for success? So if you wouldn't mind voting on that, and we'll get some input here. So I have the poll open. I know we had a few people from sales here, and you shouldn't be shy about answering this because, like I said, it's totally anonymous. All right. So I don't have anybody that's voting, either because you don't want to or because maybe you're not here. But any salespeople that are listening to this, you can just answer this for yourself. It's a little bit of self-discovery. And even myself, again, as a salesperson, I need to think about this and say, you know what? I don't always equip my technical salesperson for full success. There's more that I could do. And that's really what the whole point here is that both as pre-sales and as sales, there's more things that we could do to make sure that we are working with each other, equipping each other, and working together to do a better job. So typically what I find here is that sales may think that they're equipping pre-sales properly, but we see it time and again that that's not necessarily the case. So the next challenge, the second challenge that we really have is that pre-sales resources either are perceived to be or actually are either underutilized or improperly utilized a lot of the time. Now, how do I know this? Well, I know this because in many of my workshops, and John Kerr mentioned this yesterday as well, within, certainly the first few hours or the first quarter of the workshop, depending on how long it is, I will hear, if I'm doing something for pre-sales, I will hear them say, when is my salesperson going to get this training? Because I don't get this from them, or I don't see them doing it. And as sales, when I'm doing sales workshops, when we talk about things in terms of equipping pre-sales, they're like, oh yeah, we're all about it. So there's obviously a disconnect here, the elephant in the room, so to speak. Let's address that. And that is the second challenge, is how do we make sure that we leverage this? Now, just a quick idea here. If pre-sales is trusted by the client and sales isn't trusted as much, what if we partner together properly and pre-sales can do discovery and other things like that in conjunction and full knowledge of the salesperson so that more information can be gathered across the whole spectrum? So we'll talk a little bit in a few minutes about the way that we can work together more, but I would suggest SEs pretty much, pre-sales are pretty much like the bartender. The client will tell them almost anything. So as a salesperson, I want to leverage that because they can ask questions for me that I wouldn't be able to ask myself because inherently the clients don't necessarily trust me. So by utilizing pre-sales to do discovery and find out the proper things that are required, that can help us all get more information. We can start to bring the utilization up. For everybody in pre-sales, I would say do things to help your salesperson know that you want them to be the hero and that you can do things for them. And so all of the training and things you've been through, use that to your advantage to show that you are equipped to help them out and being properly utilized. I think sometimes, and again, I've caught myself in this over my career, is that sometimes I acted just as a demo person, and when I acted like that, I get treated like that. So if we want to be treated differently, we can start to act differently and therefore grow together as a team. So this obviously leads to frustration for the client and for us in pre-sales and as for the salesperson as well. So what I wanted to find out real quick here from you is, I'm going to put it in the chat real quick. What do you think are some frustrations from your perspective? And it could be a frustration about either the salesperson that, is frustrated with the pre-sales, or as a pre-sales person, how you might be frustrated. So if you could just put those things in the chat real quick, and then I'll share a couple of ideas with you about what we've seen in terms of some frustrations, which are going to be our to-dos in terms of making things better. So go ahead and use the chat, please, to list some of your frustrations that you may have experienced as a SE, as a pre-sales, or as sales, or as sales management, sales enablement, or the others that are on the call. And while you're doing that, I'm just going to glance back up here real quick in the chat and see. So I recognize some names here, definitely Carrie and Mark. Hello there. All right, I'm just glancing through some of the previous chat here, getting caught up while everybody else is entering. What are some of the frustrations that you might have experienced? All right, Haley, special services, including some enterprise training and events. Very good. Good to have you with us. And Lawrence. All right, I like that, Lawrence. We have to find, even if it might give them solutions not fit. Yeah. And you know what? Lawrence, I had a sales rep like that too that I worked for one time, and it didn't work for anybody. The customer sensed it too, and that's not where we want to be. To Garen's point earlier today, we want this to be about a great experience for the buyer and helping the buyer to experience us in a way that they see as helpful. And for sales, that's a little harder to achieve. For pre-sales, we already have it, so let's go ahead and make that happen. So we've got poor discovery by the AE. Client feels they're the same conversation with different people. Exactly, Beth. So like I already answered this, and we've been through that before, even maybe at the doctor's office or something like that. It's like, isn't it in my chart? Didn't I just go over that for the last 5 times with the last 3 people that I saw? And there is something to be said about confirmation. So I think it's great if we could start out with, hey, my understanding so far is this. And then what I know that, I'd like to find out is this. So this is a very important point that you raised there, Beth. Ellie, limited discovery, rep not following the full demo request process. Yep. Inconsistent messaging between both. Adam, you're right. And you know what? Again, whether you're in sales or pre-sales, and again, I've done both and I am both really, we have to admit that there's room for improvement here for both of us. And AE could just give them an overview demo. Yeah. So these are the types of things. And by the way, those totally make sense. Let's see if some of these resonate. And this is in the handout, by the way. So if you didn't grab that already, if you're watching the recording, you may want to pause it. You can, by the way, email me art@teamsalesdevelopment.com to get the handout if it's not available online. And those of you that are here, go to the docs tab. But what we've heard from others is pre-sales is sometimes frustrated with the salesperson, and we already just heard some of this. Don't get enough of the correct information or proper, to do a proper technical proof. Involvement at the last minute or with little or no time to prepare. Sales has said that some of their frustrations with pre-sales includes, somebody put it in the chat right there, Gray did, just do the usual demo. Just play your role, just do it, and that's the way we could be the best at it. And, just go do that. It's going to be fine. I've heard that before, hey, Art, I needed to do a demo. Bring your A game because, this is our only one shot at this and it's going to be a huge deal, by the way. Well, that's not a formula for success for anybody. And then the salesperson is afraid the SE will tell the truth or say too much. And that is something that as pre-sales we need to watch. And as sales, we want the SE to say the right things. We want to use them as the bartender to find things out. We want to equip them for helping us with the sale. As a team, sometimes the customer is frustrated with us, as was mentioned a moment ago, in terms of Beth mentioned about the different questions, right? And then also, if I go all the way back to the comment that Lawrence had, yes, the customer can feel like we're being very pushy. It's a harbor tour. The show up and throw up, the stuff that Great Demo helps us overcome and change. We don't want to be doing that. And at the same time, they often feel like we are not listening, which is where, again, mastering technical sales, business value discovery comes into play. Proper discovery, the Doing Discovery book, which is, You know, I've got John's book up here. I've got both of Peter's books up here and a bunch of other books right behind me. And I highly recommend that you grab all these because it is about listening. Somebody, one of the earlier sessions said, you know, we have 2 ears and 1 mouth, but we also have 2 eyes. And we can use our 2 eyes and our 2 ears to really absorb and understand what's going on. And when we don't do that, the customer gets frustrated. So that's our second challenge, is that frustration. And so as a team, we want to do things better in terms of listening, sharing information, being prepared, helping each other with what we're doing. And I'll have a lot more tips on this at the end. The third issue, which is conspiring against us, and you might not have even thought about this before, and I see it all the time because I have a portfolio that includes sales stuff. I have one sales customer, believe it or not. It's a supply chain company that I've been training for 17 years on a sales methodology that holds water to this day. Their win rates went up from 58% to 74%, and they generated 22% more revenue in the first 2 years of using that sales methodology. And by the way, it's available on Dynamics 365 and soon to be on Salesforce as well. My point is, I see that. And then on the other end of the spectrum, I do a lot of things for just pre-sales. And if you think about it for a second, many sales methods are one or the other. Many sales companies that deliver sales training are one or the other. Many sales organizations, the pre-sales and sales don't come together until a very, very high level in the organization. And in the meantime, it's up to everybody else to figure out how to make things happen. So my point is, and even sales enablement isn't always one, completely the same. We have one pre-sales enablement person on here, and typically what I might see is there's only sales or there's only pre-sales. And actually it's a pre-sales enablement person that's on here. So all of these things conspire against us. These three things, and especially this last one, which you might not have thought about and that I'm very, very aware of, which is why my goal in life is to do team sales and help bring us together. So sales and pre-sales need to purposefully strive together to work better. It's something that if you're sales, there's a lot of things you could do. If you're pre-sales, there's a lot of things that you could do. It's all about trying to work together better. But how will you do that? So this is the challenges part. This is the part about, what are our overall challenges? And let me just take a quick look at by the way, if you have any questions, put them in the Q&A, because I do want to get through this so you can see the whole thing, and then we can discuss it afterward. And you can always reach out to me after the session as well. So Lawrence is saying sales good at working through an organization structure, getting multiple stakeholders at the table. Yeah, so that's with the customer. Exactly. Pre-sales are great at building trust. Good, Lawrence. So that is a really good example. If everybody looks in the chat, what Lawrence just said about the way each of the roles, pre-sales and sales, can leverage their strengths to work together, which is what we're going to look at next. So how does sales and pre-sales work together better as a team? Well, it starts with aligning on the process. Now, here's a typical sales process, going from opportunity identification, qualification, discovery, solution creation, negotiation and purchase, deployment, and then once deployed, then measuring results and potentially cycling this back again to begin over with expanding within that customer or helping them to grow further. When it comes to a buyer's journey, which is what Garen was talking about today, it's things like business planning and impact analysis, figuring out what's going on, what are the pains and gains that they're going through. And by the way, this is a key slide, so if you don't have the handout, I highly recommend you make a note of this slide so you can look at it later. It's going to be the build of all builds for PowerPoint, but you'll get through it when we do it together here. Exploring options is something the customer might be doing, evaluating options, then they decide and negotiate. I hate putting negotiation there because per John's session yesterday, and I'm a firm believer, negotiation begins at hello. It's not about just negotiating price, but many, customers might feel that that's where they get procurement involved, for example. Then implementation, and then the customer measures results. Now, I have a quick question for all of you. And first, what we're going to do is take a look at this from the pre-sales perspective. So if you're in pre-sales, what stage are you engaged most? Let's say engaged most, or you could think of it as where do you spend most of your time? So in the chat, and this is just for pre-sales, and then we'll see if we have any sales, but I'll probably just ask everybody to answer for sales. But right now, pre-sales or SE roles, from that perspective, looking at this, where do you usually get engaged? Where are you mostly spending your time? And you could just list the stage or stages where you feel like that's my sweet spot. That's typically where I'm spending my time. So if you can all quickly do that in the chat, where as a pre-sales person or SE are you typically engaged? So this is for the SE or pre-sales. So we got pre-sales entry solution, give them a standard demo request from sales. All right. Discovery and solution, exclusively solution, solution and deploy. All right. Any other votes? If you're not in that particular role, you can, take a guess at it. So Ellie says qualifying, discovery, and solution. All right. So what I'm seeing is, and I'll just make a quick note here of this, is a lot of votes for, I've got discovery. We had a lot in solution. We had one of you in deploy. We had somebody mention qualify. We have qualify and discover, another set of votes for that. So we have this grouping right here. All right. Now, often solutions. So there's another solution. So there's seems like a pretty big grouping here for SEs in this area. Now, let's switch this to sales. Hold on a second. I'm going to put this in the chat. So as the sales role, and if there's any sales that are still on here, where would you say that you're spending your time? Go ahead and put those stage names in the chat, or the steps or whatever you want to call it. Go ahead and put those in. And since we may be a little bit short on salespeople, what would you suspect is where salespeople would say that they spend most of their time? Or even thinking about your sales counterpart, where do you see them spending most of their time? So if you can go ahead and answer in their behalf, that would be very helpful. What do you think is where salespeople would say that they spend most of their time? So I'll tell you what I typically hear, and then you can chime in if you hear anything different. I hear a good amount on discover and qualify. Yep, negotiate and purchase for sure, because that's where a lot of in traditional selling, that's where a lot of the selling happens, unfortunately. Sales entry and discover, yep. So in this area, negotiate and purchase, got another vote for that. Thank you, Ron. Right? So those are some of the areas that we see. Now, this is very interesting to me because I did not tell you how to answer this. I just said, what are the stages? And one thing I want you all to observe, and this happens, I do this in my sales workshops all the time with sales reps. And this is the same way that they tend to answer, is things like this, and again, there may be things like this. But what I want everybody to notice is almost never does anybody answer on the buying process diagram. And I think that's significant because I think, and this goes to Garen's discussion this morning, a lot of it is about that mindset of the way we look at things or the way we think of things. And typically we are thinking in terms of what we are doing. So one of the key takeaways here is shifting our mind to, thanks, Ellie, shifting our mind to what is it that the buyer is doing? So that's one insight I want to give you. Another insight that I want to give you is a lot of this is way too far to the right, way too far to the right. I'm working with a client right now who is looking to get the SEs in particular to move more to the left and be more actively involved properly with discovery and be more actively properly involved with understanding qualification. But what I would suggest is that we not only need to be focused on the client's buying process, but what is it that they are really doing? If you get an RFP or a RFQ, it's going to come somewhere around here. I'm just going to put a big R. If you get an RFP or an RFQ or a request for proposal or a quote, it's going to come somewhere around here. That means a lot of stuff has happened long before that we don't even know what happened. And it's kind of dangerous answering that without understanding. Same thing if you're doing a demo or putting together a solution. If all we know is what we are told to try to come up with, there's only so much we could do with it. So a couple key takeaways here. One is, what is the buyer going through? Where are they in their process? And for sales folks listening, make sure we know where they are so that we aren't 5 steps ahead and they're way behind and we think that we're leading the pack. The other thing to think about is, what can we do to move left in this process? And especially sales professionals, what can you do to get proactively involved with the business decision makers to understand what's going on? And Haley, I totally understand what you're saying. And that's why I'm doing this workshop. And so you can share this workshop with your salesperson, because this isn't biased toward one or the other. I'm trying to be totally honest and objective about what's going on. But Haley's comment is, we're begging to be involved earlier. And I know a lot of you are equipped to be involved earlier. So this is a discussion that this presentation should help facilitate. And I'd love to talk with you more about that, of course, after this. Now, let me run you through the rest of this diagram and tell you the way that, and this is just a schematic and it doesn't represent everything, but it's the high level of what I think is a good model for the way we can try to work together. And this focuses on a couple of key stakeholders in the buying process. All right, couple key, and when I say stakeholder, by the way, everybody, thank you, Haley. I like that. You're taking tons of notes. When I say stakeholder, what I mean is anybody from the buyer's decision process that has a say in the decision. So it's a wide range of people. But let's focus on 2 main stakeholders, a business stakeholder and a technical stakeholder. So from a business stakeholder perspective, and what we're going to look at is what's their level of involvement across this whole spectrum, this whole buying cycle. The business stakeholder is going to be involved very heavily at the beginning when they are trying to decide what to do. So business stakeholders don't wake up saying, hey, I need to buy some kind of solution today. They wake up with business challenges. They have problems, they have gains they're trying to achieve. So they are very much focused on things like business planning and figuring out what is impacting the business that needs to change. Now, they kind of drop off, the business stakeholders drop off in the middle of the process because, frankly, they're going to delegate the responsibility for this to others. Doesn't mean they're completely not involved. It just means it's not their main level of involvement because others are going to be involved, as you're going to see. Once again, at the end here, so at the beginning, it's all about the business vision and the issues. At the end, they're going to be involved as well. And just to see, I can't spend too much time on this. I'd love to spend an hour just talking about this. But what is the end? Putting this in the chat, and I can't type and talk at the same time. So why would there be a business stakeholder involved at the end here? Put it in the chat if you have an idea of what is it that, why does their involvement jump back up again here at implementation and certainly measuring results and even perhaps at negotiation. So what's going on at the end here? Why would the business stakeholder be back involved again? And this is going to be very important for us. Any ideas? All right. So it's end user validation. Yeah, Adil, exactly. Or Adil, sorry. Yes, it's about end user validation. It's about validating that the results have been achieved, that they get the value they want. They have an idea here of what the problem or gain is. They want to make sure that problem has been solved or the gain has been achieved. So this is very important for us. You know, one of the great demo philosophies, the main philosophy is begin with the end in mind, or do the last thing first. So let's think about what is our end goal, and therefore what should we do at the beginning. I'm always amazed when I do a lot of academy workshops too, for both pre-sales and for sales academies, training SDRs and BDRs how to do the process at the very beginning. And it amazes me that oftentimes in companies, all they're told to do is their job at that point in time, how to identify opportunities, how to do qualification. What I teach them is, what's the end in mind? Okay, you're trying to get a meeting with a business stakeholder, but why would they want to take that meeting? It's about the value they're going to get out of it at the end. Now, there's also the technical stakeholder, and you could probably know where this is going already. The business decision maker, the business stakeholder, hands over the decision to the technical stakeholder to implement. So they're very involved here and potentially all the way out as they implement it. What are they doing? In the middle, yes, they're looking at features and functions, but as it applies to that business solution. And yes, that's why they're evaluating the options and we need to show solutions to them. At the end, they're also probably doing the implementation or having some part of it, or at least being aware of that as far as what they need to do. How do we get involved? Well, as a salesperson, the AM involvement should be high at the beginning, might drop off a little at the middle. What are they doing at the beginning? Qualifying and discovering. In the middle, it's about the influence and working the relationships. And at the end, it's about business close. And I'll talk more about that in a minute. It's about business close, making sure that the PO is signed off. But if they've done the job right up front and done proper qualification and discovery, that's much easier to do at the end. This should be heavily weighted on the front end in terms of what they spend their time doing. And that will make the back end a lot easier. What is the pre-sales or SE involvement? Well, it mirrors, of course, the technical stakeholder. Notice I draw it a little bit to the left because I'd like to believe that we can get involved maybe even before the technical stakeholders are involved or even during the discovery that's happening up front here. So what is this SE doing? We're doing the technical proof here, which means we need to know what it is we're proving and what the value is that comes out of it. And then what we're doing is technical close, making sure that that business close has a higher probability of being achieved. So this is a key diagram. There's a lot we can talk about here. This lays the basis for why we need to be more involved in the buyer's journey and what we could do as sales and as pre-sales to try to move left and also coordinate. Notice the way these lines crisscross each other. That is a point where we can coordinate and make sure that we're both tracking along, but we don't necessarily have the same amount of exact involvement throughout the whole thing. So the roles in the buying process, and I'll go through this pretty quickly here. The roles in the buying process include for business stakeholders, approvers, business decision makers, evaluators. There's a whole bunch more of them that I'll cover in future talks and in the book. In technical stakeholders, you've got owners or implementers, technical decision maker, and evaluators. The two I want to focus on just for a minute or two here is for sales, focus on the business decision maker. This is the person that is going to be saying, I want this solution. I am the one that's affected. I am the one that's going to benefit from the solution. I'm the one that wants to see the value. And for SEs or pre-sales, it's about the technical decision maker, the person who says that they can move forward and probably have been delegated by the business decision maker to know what the answer should be, and they want to get the thumbs up from them. So the next two slides are key. This defines, and this, by the way, comes from a workshop that I wrote way back in 2005 with a colleague that was called Top SE, and some of you might have been through that, or the predecessor, which I also facilitated, called Strategy and Tactics for Technical Sales. It was called STOTS before that. So if any of you go back that far, you may have been through that, or maybe even with me. But what I want you to focus on is for the SE role, it's about technical close. And what does that mean? It means we confirm that the technical decision maker validates our solution meets their technical requirements. This is very often called a technical win, and that's where everybody tends to stop. Oh, they love us? Great. Well, you know what? They might be saying that to the competition too. So it needs to go beyond that. Full technical closure includes this. Yes, has to be there. And they say that they will select our solution at the exclusion of the alternatives, not just other competitors, but our biggest competitor of do nothing. Do nothing. And we cover that a lot in Great Demo as far as what we can do to overcome do nothing. That still isn't enough because they might love it, but we're working with somebody who has no authority or no ability to make the decision happen. So we also want them to work with the business decision maker and actually recommend our solution. Because remember, they were probably delegated the responsibility. Let's not just get a sign off on them saying, hey, that was wonderful. You did a fantastic demo. We want them to recommend it to the business decision maker. At the same time, in parallel, the account manager or sales should be working on the business decision maker to confirm they see the value of the way we address their needs. And they select the solution at the exclusion of other business alternatives. They're not just deciding on your software, your solution. They're deciding on things like hiring new people or upgrading their equipment or maybe saving some cash for a rainy day. The third component is they sponsor us to the approver, the person that signs off on it. So keep those two things in mind. You can go back and review those later, but I want to show you real quick, and then we're going to cap this off with some key takeaways for you in terms of what you can do about this. So what are the roles then in enticing buying? How can we become more tuned in with the buyer? And I've got this pyramid here, which you'll see represents a bunch of different stuff that I'll explain more later, but in the book and other webinars. But between technical and business, there's a nice overlap of what we should be doing together. So from a sales and account manager role, they need to really own the top part of this pyramid. It's about the account and opportunity strategy, deep understanding of business needs, all that front part of the buying process, the relationship with business stakeholders, and especially the BDM and the TDM. They should have a relationship with that. Now notice this starts to turn into a bit of a dotted line because this will be less and less of a focus as we move down, but it's still an important part of the role. So it doesn't mean they're getting out of it. So for example, the value of the solutions and some overview knowledge of what the solutions are, but not the deep knowledge. They shouldn't need to know that. As a pre-sales role, what we want to do is kind of working from the bottom up here, deep technical knowledge, yes, benefits and all that, of course, but a relationship with the stakeholders, especially the TDM. And it goes farther than that, the value of the solution for the TDM so that they can recommend us. And further than that, understanding the business needs and the value of the business solutions. So you could start to see here, and the value for the BDM, there is a nice healthy overlap right in the middle here where we should be communicating. Clearly, there's things as a pre-sales role we don't, need that we do need to do, the sales doesn't need to do. And there's in a sales role things we need to do that the pre-sales doesn't need to be involved with every day and all the time. We each have our own specific things, but we don't have a swim lane. Somebody once said sales and SEs are sales and pre-sales are like 50-50. I disagree with that. I think it's 75-75. Or somebody yesterday said it's like a marriage. And that makes sense too. It's like 100% and 100%. I think 75 and 75 is a good analogy though, because there's a healthy overlap there where we need to be sharing. If you're in pre-sales and you aren't getting this from sales, ask. If you're in sales and you're not communicating it to pre-sales, make sure that they get that and that that's a main area of what you're doing. So that's a little bit about what it looks like. And now we can summarize the solutions that I have in mind because we've basically covered that through the rest of our presentation so far. And then we'll try to have a couple minutes for wrap up and questions. So what are the solutions that we have in mind? Well, for sales, the advice would be is trust your SE more and involve them appropriately. So always involving early might not be appropriate. We don't want to get involved. We don't want to involve pre-sales in things that are unqualified. That came up in the panel that I had yesterday with my colleague Natasha and three others who we were talking about, what does it really take for us in a down economy? And one of the concerns was don't work on things that aren't qualified. So it is up to sales to make sure it's qualified enough to get pre-sales involved. So maybe from a sales perspective, though, you don't think you need to involve pre-sales until quite far down the process. I would challenge that and say, think about moving the sales SE a little bit to the left, maybe sooner than you think you should get them involved, but do it appropriately. For sales, share the qualification and discovery information. Now, for many of you, it might be in your CRM, so check that out and find out if it is, right? And for salespeople, if you can give access to your pre-sales in the CRM and you've actually documented it in there, please do that. That's one of the things the apps that I've developed help with, by the way. So what are the business needs and critical issues? What's the value desired and the strategy for the opportunity? And then what is the competitive landscape? As somebody mentioned earlier, sales is good and they should be looking at What is the competitive landscape? Who are the stakeholders? What is the influence that's going on? So we can work together to engineer the influence. And by all means, what can we do to overcome do nothing? That is a huge risk for the deal, because that's kind of the status quo now, right? And then engage your SE to expand discovery and implications of the discovery. Get more information and insights about the stakeholders' needs. So give that to the pre-sales, right? And then plan questions together so that you don't have this repetition of questions. Make sure you know who's asking what and at what level of the pyramid. SEs, yes, should be. And by the way, let me go back to that diagram real quick. Notice that the SE role kind of covers the entire gamut of this pyramid, and that's by design. The SE really has to cover it all. Sales is very heavily weighted on the top and not so much down here. So yes, SEs should be prepared. Sales should prepare SEs to ask questions even at higher levels, because we may run into those people. And I've got a great story for that, but we don't have time for that. You'll have to wait for that for later. For pre-sales, here's the suggestions, and I've talked about some of these already as well. Use a help me help you approach for sales. They want to win, we can help them win. Help me to help you win. And we can both help the customer buy, right? That's what it's about. So be prepared and show you could do it. In the down economy, and we talked about this in our panel yesterday, go back and review your trainings. Maybe pull your salesperson over and share with them some insights that you've got, perhaps from this presentation or for other things that you've been through. Ask your sales counterpart for their information. They might have it, and we might not have been asking them. Sales might be willing to share it, but we haven't been asked. So first, start by asking, and then provide some of that domain experience. Is that Pruvy? Wow, that was a spell check that didn't get picked up. Provide some domain expertise and identify gaps where you can work together to figure out how you're going to solve that. And then focus on the BDM and TDM. Show the salesperson that you can help with closing the BDM, not just the TDM. Address critical issues and the value, and show the way the solution alleviates pain. And very importantly, as John always points out, I'm a big fan of this, also achieves gain. It's not all about pain. We talk about the pain chain. There's a gain chain too. And often they're very related. And then finally, use the driving reason for change or a compelling event or a critical date to compel action. Remember, we said we want to entice the buyer to buy. Finally, for the sales team working together, work on influencing in tandem. Make sure that you're looking at connecting the business value, highlight the risk of do nothing, emphasize total cost of ownership, divide and conquer. Use that pyramid to decide what you're going to be working on. Meet in the middle to drive action. And then finally, assign roles on your demos and presentations and do dry runs. So I know I threw a lot at you there. We are, in conclusion, saying we want to help the buyer turn from a push to a pull. If they're pulling, we know we're winning. Optimize the interactions, and for us, turn it from a sell to a buy. Therefore, we can make it seamless in the way we do our sales. So, Robin, I know that I warned I might use the whole time, but let's see what we have for quick comments. And by all means, grab the presentation, take a screenshot of this, reach out to me. I'd love to work with you and help you out further, and maybe even watch the replay of this later. So thank you all very much. I really, really appreciate it. Oh, and while Robin's wrapping up, please put your key takeaways in the chat, because we're going to be kicked out of here in a moment. Thank you, Robin.
Of course. Thank you so much, Art. It looks like the only real question that we have at the moment, which you kind of went into a little bit at the end, was how can pre-sales change the culture of the sales rep to create more trust that the pre-sales is a resource that should be used early, more often, and sometimes even lead the discussions?
Yeah, it's the help me help you. We're in this together as a team. It shouldn't be us and them. And I don't even like the name pre-sales. We are all in sales. So use the help me help you. Use assets like this. Educate your salesperson, and you should be able to work together better. So if you could all put key takeaways in the chat real quick. We have 45 seconds to go. And Robin, I know you have some wrap up. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it.
Of course. No worries, I'll try and fly through it. So, of course, we want to remind everybody about our DemoFest game, where each session you attend and each session feedback survey you fill out gets you points to win some of our awesome prizes. We're excited to bring DemoFest on the road again. We had a great time in San Francisco, and we're going to be showing up in Dublin, London, and New York City. You can register for any of those events at demofest.com or at the Docs tab on the right. We encourage you to stop by our expo hall to visit our premier partners of DemoFest. This is a free event because of how much work our partners have put in. And last but not least, thank you all for joining us for working together seamlessly as a sales and pre-sales team. And thank you, Art, for that
Bye,
amazing
everybody.
presentation.